Oh, what? You thought I was done talking about the Universal Monsters? Bitch, you don't know me! So yes, this is gonna be my rankings of the Universal Monster movies. Now, a few rules, real quick. A few rules. Rule number one. I'm only going to rank the first movies. The first movies in their series. If I tried to rank all of the sequels and whatnot, we'd be here all goddamn night. So it's only going to be the original first movies, like the big name movies. The only one sequel, you probably know which, there's only going to be one sequel on this list, and you all know which one that one's going to be. So, there's that. Keep in mind, rule number 2 is, this is my personal list, and I do in no way, shape, or form hate any of these movies. I in no way hate a single movie on this list. It's just a matter of rewatchability. It all comes down to that of, like, which movie do I want to rewatch more? Would it be that one or this one, you know? So I do love all of these movies on here, but it's just a matter of least favorite to favorite, and that's how we're going to do it, from least favorite Universal Monster movie to favorite Universal Monster movie. And I'm always excited to hear what your list is in the comments below. I like doing these ranking videos because they're kind of fun and really engage people, and it really surprises people when I say, I like this movie over that one. Anyway. So, and again, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not saying this is how the list should go. So, yeah. Having said all that, excited to see what you guys have in the comments, but for right now, let's get started with our from least favorite to favorite. Starting off at the bottom of the list, we have The Phantom of the Opera. Now, I'm counting, you may be thinking, oh, it's the Lon Chaney movie. No, which is weird because you'd think they would, you'd think Universal would own more that one to the to the Universal Monsters, because yeah, that movie is very much in. Even though it's a silent movie, it feels more in tone with everything that the Universal Monsters are. But no, the one they always seem to pull with is the Claude Rains one, which is in color. And that's one of the biggest drawbacks with this movie, is that this movie is in color. And you may be thinking, well, why is that a problem? Because all the movies are in black and white, and to have this movie in color feels it feels bizarre. It feels really bizarre. And I've seen like cuts of it with black and white, like someone has edited the movie to make it look black and white, and it looks great, actually. It looks even better in black and white. So it surprises me that this one is in color, and that this feels more like a romantic comedy. In fact, it jerks in between horror and romantic comedy. However, there are some saving graces. The cinematography, despite it being in color, is actually pretty good. Like, I will admit, this is like almost like it's trying to be Oscar bait. Also, the major saving grace of this movie is Claude Rains as the Phantom. He is absolutely stunning as the Phantom in this movie. So, there's that saving grace. But like I said, it feels, because it's in color and how it handles its characters, feels so distant from all the other films. It really does, but maybe that's just me. So let's move on to the next movie on this list. And the next movie on this list is The Mummy. Yeah, The Mummy is on this list. Now, like I said, keep in mind, I love all of these movies. So, The Mummy is with Boris Karloff, and this is a great piece of, like, just spooky, dark, you have to understand that this movie came out in an era before the Film Authority came in and edited a lot of these films. So this was actually pretty... now keep in mind, it is of its time, and that this movie, it really pushes boundaries of that time in the late 30s. That film really pushed of how dark you could do a horror movie back then, and some of the just violence in this film really does set you off. And I really love the atmosphere in here, and you cannot deny that opening sequence with Boris Karloff in the full mummy costume just coming out and slowly creeping around, just grabbing the parchments and walking out, and the guy's screaming and just laughing crazy later, and he's like, he went for a little walk. That burns in your mind. That straight up burns into your mind. So I really do love this movie. The reason why it's a little lower, it was a little hard to admittedly pick which one was going, it was hard, because I knew Phantom was going to be at the bottom. But as for the other movies, it was a little harder to place, like, which one I'd want to watch more, stuff like that. So let's move on now to our next film, and that is The Wolfman. Now, The Wolfman is another... This one really brings home the gothic kind of style to it, aside from one other movie, and trust me, we'll get to that one. But this one really hits home, like, the dark, just gothic feel of in those, like, moors, like, out in the fields. You can clearly see that this movie, like, it basically set the groundwork for every werewolf movie following. Now, granted, sorry, chair. Granted, the major thing with this film is, like I said, it set the groundwork for all the other werewolf movies to follow. And this was a story that essentially, like, gave us one of the best horror actors out there. Lon Chaney Jr., the son of Lon Chaney, who really is I feel like he's a very underrated actor. Everyone knows that he comes from a horror background, but you really feel, like, very sad for him, and he's actually really good at humor, too. He's a very sympathetic actor, and very fun, just very fun to watch in this film. And again, that werewolf makeup is iconic. Same with Jack Pierce, Jack Pierce, what can I say? Before we had Rick Baker or Tom Savini, there was Jack Pierce. So yeah, there you go, The Wolfman. So, moving on to our next one, and the next film on our list is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, before I go any further, I should mention... Let me show you something real quick. Hang on, it's worth it. Okay, so, you see that? This is a picture I got at Spooky Empire, which is a horror-themed convention in Orlando. But the last time it was there was at Tampa. They moved it to Tampa. It's sadly not this year. I got this last year. And the picture is signed by Rico Browning, the creature himself. Yeah, this is autographed by the actor of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Absolutely love this picture. I've got a few other signed autographs, but this is my number one right here. Absolutely love that. So let's talk about The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So there's a little bias there. I got the autograph, but yeah. Creature from the Black Lagoon was the final Universal monster. And it was definitely like a departure from a lot of the other classic Universal monsters. But it still carried that gothic feel, even though it was out in the jungle. The creature was just this... It's more of a... It feels like an action horror movie. Like, this feels like it was the progenitor for, like, Predator and all these other action horror movies you see out there. Because it definitely has that gothic feel, but is more of, like, a fun action film, too. So I kind of classify The Creature from the Black Lagoon as an action horror. It's interesting to note that you have to keep in mind that the Universal monster movies really wrote the book on horror. And not just horror itself, but the genres of horror that follow, like romantic horror, horror comedy, action horror, gothic horror. These movies, right here, wrote genres. Like, they wrote the playbook on horror movies and the versions of horror movies that would follow, like the mixing of genres as well. So, yeah, and also, if it hadn't been for these movies, we wouldn't get a Universal Studios. There would be no Universal Studios theme park, there would be no Jurassic Park, there would be no A.T. You thank these guys for all of that. You thank these guys for that. Anyway, as I was saying, it's a fun movie. I especially love the underwater scenes. That's where the real cinematography comes in. It's beautiful. The creature is such a great design. God, I'm hoping we get a cool remake soon at some point from Universal. Anyway, so like I was saying, you got that. So let's move on to the next movie on our list, and that is none other than Dracula. So Dracula is, what can I say? Bela Lugosi is Count Dracula. What do you want me to say? We also tend to look over the actor who plays Renfield in the film, because the dude, had they made a Batman movie in the 30s or 40s, that dude would have been perfect as the Joker. Like, you look at some of the scenes in this film, and he is straight Joker. Like, there are two scenes, and you'll know him too when you see him, where he's just laughing. It's like, oh my god, this dude could have been Joker in a past film. Like, in some twisted out there in the multiverse, there is a 30s or 40s Batman movie with him as the Joker out there in the multiverse. Anyway, so I love this movie because, again, Bela Lugosi, the gothic. This is where the real gothic feel comes from. This, Frankenstein, and Wolfman were the big ones to give the Universal Monsters that gothic gravitas to it. It was a absolutely beautiful thing to look at in this, it's a beautiful film to look at in, with these sweeping scenes, and it almost comes off like a psychological horror too, where there's no real violence. In fact, you don't see Dracula suck anyone's blood, but you get the idea of it. You get a lot of feel to it. The one thing that does kind of hurt it is that it is based off of more, not so much the novel, but more of the Broadway play, where actually they found Bela, but they do more of describing the scenes, is probably because of budget, but also from the play, where it's more like it's telling you what's going on. But still, it's a great movie, and yeah. I will say, though, that it does feel lacking if you don't have Renfield or Dracula in the scenes, but trust me, when they're there, they eat up the scenes, along with Edward Van Sloan, who would play Dr. Van Helsing in and also other characters in other films. So, moving on, we've now gotten to the top 3. And you're probably excited to hear what the top 3 are. Now, honorable mention, even though I don't consider them part of the films, they still get an honorable mention from me, and those are the Abbott and Costello movies. Of the Abbott and Costello horror movies, especially Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. They really do, it's great comedy, it's great, early horror comedy, and, they really feel like, in some scenes, really straight up like the classic Universal Monster movies. So, it's a neat crossover film. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, so, let's move on to our top 3, starting with Frankenstein. Yeah. This movie, again, much like Dracula and the Wolfman, this set the groundwork, because here's the thing. That movie's line, "It's alive," was never in the original book. But even in the movie that Kenneth Branagh did for Frankenstein, had the line from the movie in that movie that's based more off the book. That's how iconic "It's Alive" is. Boris Karloff, as the monster, is one of the best character roles in cinema history. Just how he conveys sympathy with just pure savagery. It's been noted that Stan Lee, a lot of his inspiration, one of the major inspirations for the Hulk was Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, as well as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. A lot of people forget that, but yeah. Just, Boris Karloff in this film, the sets are great. Colin Clive is Dr. Frankenstein. It's a beautiful piece of film. It really is. So let's move on now to our number 2, and it's the sequel to Frankenstein with The Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein is one of the greatest films in cinema history. Although there is, and you're probably wondering, why is it number 2 then? I've got reasons, and you've already guessed what my number 1 is at this point. But this movie is astonishing. James Whale's vision for this film was uninterrupted by the studio, because that was the only way they could get him to do a sequel, was the only way you get to do this is if I get full control of the film. So that was the conceit for Universal Studios. So this film was again, Boris Karloff knocks it out of the park, and for the bride, who's only there for a short amount of time, really steals the scenery in the final minutes she's in the film. But again, Karloff steals the show in this film, and there's great imagery of religion, religion, sex, gender. It's very underlying in this film, and a lot of which came from James Whale himself, who was probably the one of, if not the only, at the time, mind you, at the time, gay man in Hollywood, openly gay person in Hollywood who was directing films. So he had a lot to say with the underscoring of this film between religion, sex, gender, and all of that. So I could spend hours and hours talking about Bride of Frankenstein, but anyway. So let's talk about my number one. And my number one is The Invisible Man. Why is The Invisible Man my favorite Universal monster movie? Well, I got a few reasons. First off, the special effects. Now I know what you're thinking. Special effects, really? Yeah, really. Because of its time, the Invisible Man was way ahead of its time in terms of special effects. Yes, it's cheap now, but back then, put yourself back in the 30s, where you see a guy like unravel this bandages off of his face and there's nothing there, and yet you could still see the clothes dangling in midair. It's, again, it's just black lighting and Velcro, but back then, it blew people's minds. Claude Rains, as the Invisible Man, is a perfect casting. He is phenomenal in this film. This was his first major film, and the irony is, you don't see his face until he's dead at the end of the film. His voice, he's just, the power behind his voice is phenomenal. There is just great acting all around. He is just this energetic character. It's almost like a horror comedy at times, too. It really does feel like a really cool horror comedy in this film. I absolutely adore this movie. It's just like for personal preference myself, but I love The Invisible Man. So, there you go. So you guys tell me in the comments below, where do you rank the original Universal monster movies? And I'm always curious to see why, people rank them this way. I am very interested to see everyone's listing. And again, this is just my personal list. If you think a movie should have been higher or lower on the list, that's totally fine. No problem. This is just my personal opinion, and I'm always excited to hear yours. So just comment below, let me know, and once again, I am Mr. Multiverse. See you next time in the Multiverse.